One of the things I often say is that sales happen long before you actually have a sales conversation. There's so many different touch points that occur along a customer's journey or client's journey and as they're engaging with you and your business. And I am super excited for today's guest on the podcast because we're going to talk about branding strategies, branding mistakes, best practices to help make your sales conversations more powerful, have more confidence, and definitely increase your clarity. I'm Dr. Nadia Brown, founder of the Doyen Agency and creator of the Straight Talk About Sales podcast. And I am so excited for our guest today, Nakita Pope. Nakita is the chief chick and principal brand strategist of Branding Chicks, a boutique branding agency in Atlanta with clients all over the US. Branding Chicks specializes in brand strategy, development, consulting, and management for femme-owned businesses and femme-focused brands. She helps clients narrow their focus, gives their brands a voice, slingshot their confidence, and clarifies their message to resonate directly with their audiences. She also helps businesses large and small to brand or rebrand to attract and grow customer bases for new products and professional services through custom, creative, relevant brand promoting strategies. Over the past 25 years, she has worked as a brand strategist, graphic designer, creative director, and brand manager, giving her experiences that inform how she works with her clients. Her passion for brand strategy also extends to her advertising strategy, branding, and design professorship at the Creative Circus for 13 years. In 2019, she also took on an additional role as their diversity and inclusion advisor, and a year later, the design department senior advisor role. In 2020, she was also named one of the Graphic Design USA magazine's People to Watch. And then 2021, she was honored as an AIGA Atlanta Fellow, which recognizes her contributions to the design community locally and nationally. She's amazing. She is involved in several professional and nonprofit organizations, including AIGA, African American Graphic Designers, and Good Thinking Atlanta. Along with her work and passion projects, she now gets to share her knowledge and experiences with diverse audiences on the international speaking stage for organizations like WPP Global, BBDO Atlanta, Phoenix Design Week, The One Club, Maryland Institute College of Arts, and the Georgia Tech College of Business. As always, her goal is to wield her crayons for good. And our conversation was so amazing. So I invite you to tune in. Welcome to another episode of Straight Talk About Sales. I am super excited for today's guest, Nakita Pope, founder of Branding Chicks. Welcome, Nakita.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh my goodness. I am so excited to chat with you. And in full disclosure, Nakita and I go way, way back.
Way back.
Way back. So we have, in a lot of ways been on this entrepreneurial journey together. And whew, child, it has been quite a journey.
It's been a journey. Yes.
Quite the journey. So tell us, Nakita, what has that journey been like for you and what has brought you to the work that you're doing today?
Wonderful. Well, I started as a graphic designer. I was always creative growing up, and I knew that I wanted to do something creative as a career. It took me a bit to figure that out, not too long, but in high school, I was convinced that I was going to be an architect because I was like, I want to be creative, and that was the only thing I could think of. And I started doing all my research, and I realized just how much math was involved. And I'm sure those of you out there who know Nadia knows that she likes math. I do not. I do not like math. So I kept looking and I discovered graphic design. I'm like, this is perfect. It's a good mix of the things that I love and the things that I want to learn about. And so I've been in marketing and advertising through the creative side for about 25 years. I've done a little bit of everything. I've been a graphic designer, an art director, a creative director. I've worked in marketing agencies and graphic design firms. I've worked in-house for companies and their creative teams. So it's looked a lot of different ways over the years. And that part of my journey led me to branding. I realized that one of the things that I really loved about design was the strategic part of it and really being able to solve problems and not just create things that look good, but solve problems through that and be able to meet objectives like from a business standpoint or to solve a customer's problem or issue or tap into something that they care about through all of that strategy. And so as I did my last creative director job, I got a chance to do much more branding and marketing in that space. And I kind of fell in love with it. So when I decided to go out on my own, I knew that that's what I wanted to do because it would allow me to do the things that I was trained to do as a graphic designer, but it also gave me an opportunity to do more with the strategic side of it and dive even further into a brand. So that got me really excited. And then I had always had freelance projects and worked with clients on the side, even when I had full-time jobs. And I realized that it was hard. It's so hard to brand yourself, right? I know that from experience. So when I work with clients, like I totally get it because it was really difficult for me to figure out what my voice was and who I wanted to serve and all those things. But I realized that all those clients I had worked with over the years, that the majority of them were women. And that was not necessarily by design on my part. But I also talked to them. I asked them questions. I went back and interviewed them. Like, why did you choose me? Why did you continue to come back and work with me? And the things that I heard back were the things that shaped my brand. I realized that there's a certain sensibility that I naturally have that, appeals to women, number one, but also like that's something that's really close to my heart. I mentor and teach a lot of women in a lot of different capacities. And so I'm like, this is perfect. And I think just how I work with people, not just what I do, but how I work with people would seem to be what people were responding to. And those aspects of my personality, I think, just came naturally. So once I got out of my head and actually got the information, it was a lot easier for me to sort of build that brand. So now I get to work with women-owned businesses and femme-focused brands all over the country and some amazing women doing some amazing things. So it brings me joy, it fills my heart, and I still get to be creative and
Yes.
solve problems.
Oh, you're so good at all of it. I know from speaking from personal experience, you're just good. Just good.
Thank you.
So I hear you talking a lot about brand. I want you to take a moment and define brand because I feel like, even though I'm not the branding expert, but I feel like people get it wrong. How would you define brand?
So my definition of brand is that it's every single touch point that you have with your audience. So that's everything from, I like to call it the 300,000 foot view all the way down to the 300-foot view. So that's, let's take a brand that everybody's probably familiar with, right? So Chick-fil-A, for instance. Chick-fil-A is everything from what their core values are, whether you agree with them or not. It's their core values and all the things that they have founded their company on, to the kind of service that you get, to the products that they serve you, to the fact that when you go through the drive-through that every single person you encounter says my pleasure. Like every single touch point along the way is part of their brand. So when you think about branding and you think about brand strategy, it has to be thoughtful and it has to include the gamut of how your audience is going to experience your brand, because it's not just one thing. Whether it's a product or a service, there's so many little touch points along the way that make a difference.
I love it. And I tie that in. And one of the reasons why I love your definition of branding is because it's so, believe it or not, closely related to sales, right? Like,
oh, for sure.
I often tell people sales starts long before you actually are in that conversation. Like there's so much energy and it's an important part of the process of having that conversation. But your sales start a long time. You start at hello, right? And or even before the hello. And so branding and having a solid brand being really confident in your brand, knowing what it is, and having that brand clarity will definitely help and impact your sales.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're absolutely tied together because, when you have a strong brand, often you get people who come to you because they already know who you are, right? So
Mhm.
even in terms of outbound sales versus inbound sales, like often those people are coming to you because they already know who you are. They already see themselves in that brand. So when it's time to have a sales conversation, they're already 75% there,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And even if you go out to them, and they don't know anything about you, let's say it's a cold conversation, like they might hear everything you have to say and they might really enjoy that conversation or be really intrigued or want to hear more. When they go to look at everything else that you have out in the ethers about your brand, it all has to match up, because,
Mhm.
on your behalf, like Nadia, if you're the salesperson or you're doing sales for someone else, like they may love that conversation. But then if they go to that website or they Google it and they see all the things that pop up about that brand or about that company, it has to be consistent and it has
Mhm.
to still leave them with the same feeling or a better feeling. Otherwise, you've lost the sale.
Absolutely, and I've been there. When there was a misalignment, I was like, "Ooh,
Right, right.
okay."
It matters. And sometimes your audience can articulate why, but
Mhm.
they will definitely be like, yeah, I was on board and now I'm not.
Yep, yep, I have definitely been, especially when representing another brand.
Yeah,
That's
for
why,
sure.
I had to get better at the questions that I even asked, like, "Oh, hold up.
Right.
Hold up."
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the clarity and confidence because I think that a lot of times people talk a lot about brands and they think that, if I get my colors and I get my logo, that all is well. But
Mhm.
there's a lot more in it, not only just the clarity and confidence around the brand, but also in the messaging and how people feel and all of that. So, what's some of the process that goes into gaining that clarity and confidence within a brand?
Yeah. So I think I ask a lot of questions. I tell my clients this, this.
She does. Facts.
And I find that, I ask those questions for two reasons. One, because we need to dig deep here, but also I need to know how many of these questions my client has already asked themselves and how many of them that are not even on their radar. So whether they have an answer or not, have they asked themselves that question at all, right?
Right.
So that's a large part of it. The other part of it is, getting that foundation really clear. Like you would be surprised at the number of people that start businesses that aren't actually clear about what they're selling.
Mm.
Like they don't actually know what their product is or they don't know what their service is. Big part of it is who your audience is. And I think, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and I'm like, well, who's your audience? And they're like, well, this is really for everyone.
Oh,
And like
yeah.
that's the worst possible answer. And like I know that for some people you think the broader the better, but when it comes to branding that's actually not true. It doesn't mean that you're alienating anybody. It just means that you need to be clear about who your ideal client is. Like, yeah, you would sell it to anyone or you could perform this service for anyone, but who's your ideal client? And
Mhm.
knowing that can guide everything about your business strategy, about your sales, about, what you do to sell yourself or show yourself in the world. So that knowing who that audience is very important, and not just the demographics, the ones that we always hear, like how old are they? How much money do they make? Are they single? Do they have kids? Where do they live? Those things are important, but the psychographics sometimes are more important because that really gets you into the head of the people that you want to sell to. Who are, how do they think? What keeps them up at night? What are the things that they're committed to? What do they feel really strongly about? And those things are the things that allows you to align with those people so that you
Mhm.
don't have to sell them very hard. They just see it. They're like, oh, this is the person I need.
Yep. Yep.
And it's very clear to them, right?
Yep.
So like that clarity is what not only allows you as a business owner to be very confident, like you said, but it also allows you to be very clear about what your next moves are. It's really, I mean, all of us have been there. It's really easy to get caught up by the shiny thing,
Oh
be
my
like,
gosh.
hey, these people are doing that. Maybe I should do that too. Oh, wait, maybe I should do that. And it's like, you could be all over the place. But if you're clear about what your brand is and who you serve, then the filter for that cuts out all the riffraff. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, if I do that thing that other people are doing, does that appeal to my audience? If the answer is no, then I shouldn't be doing it. Is that aligned with my business strategy? If it's not, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. Like I think that just that clarity allows you to move so much more confidently and so much more efficiently because unless you're independently wealthy, which I think most entrepreneurs are not, like, you have
Working
to
on
be
it.
about your resources. You can't just be like, I'm going to throw money at everything. You want to put your resources, your time, your energy, your money behind the things that are going to make the most impact. And so when you're clear about your brand, I think that makes that so much easier.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think too, being clear, so there are lots of people out there that don't know what you're selling. I do know
Yeah. Yeah,
that.
for
Like
sure.
what is happening right now? And they don't know who they're selling it to. And so one of the questions, like when we used to do done for you sales support. And one of the
Mhm.
first questions I would always ask is, how will we know that this is the right client? Because
Mm,
part of that also is, who do you want to work with? Like,
yes,
just because you can work with everybody doesn't mean you
exactly.
should or that you want to. And so,
Exactly.
like, how do we know that that person, but even if you don't have someone doing your sales, there are things that you can put in place to help you identify, is this someone that I want to work with?
Hmm.
Is this someone whose values align? Is this someone who, I'm going to be excited to work with? All of those things play a part. And I think we just sometimes get so caught up, like you said, and I've been there. I remember the many a times when I've had folks like, Nadia, what are you doing? What,
It's
what,
easy
what
to
exactly
do.
are you doing? Like, oh, that's a great idea. Let me go do that. No, 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 no. Focus, 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 ma'am.
It is so easy to do. And like, as you said, it's who do you really want to be working with, like in a perfect world? And, it's easy to just kind of get caught up in like, I just need to make some money or I just need to get this thing off the ground. I can solidify that later. But like, the truth is that the earlier the better
Yes.
because, I talk to so many people, they might actually be somewhat successful, but they might, for instance, have every like 75% of their clients are the people that they don't want to work with. So
Mhm.
now when they shift gears to where they really need it to be in the first place, now they go through the growing pains of probably in some cases losing some of those people in order to gain the traction with the people that they really want to be working with, right? And it's not even just with your audience, like it's the people that you choose to partner with, your partnerships.
Mhm.
Where do you advertise and market yourself? Like if you're clear about your brand, then all of those decisions are so much easier. And you have a litmus test to hold it up against and be like, okay, this doesn't match.
Right.
That doesn't match. So I'm just not gonna do that. And if you're working with other people or you started a business with someone else, then that also helps to cut out a lot of arguments. I really want to
Mhm.
do this, but I don't. Okay, what's more aligned with our brand?
Exactly. It's nice to have that roadmap.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So I have to ask you, because I
Yeah.
know you have this saying and even a book. I won't say that real loud, titled Branding is Like Dating. Let's talk
Yes.
about it.
Yes. I love that analogy. I think, especially because I serve so many women, I
Mhm.
think it allows people to take something that they know about dating and map it onto something that they may not know a lot about branding. And the reason why I use that analogy is because branding really is like dating. It is a relationship building exercise. It's
Mhm.
constantly changing. Like even think about all the relationships in your life. None of them has started in one place and stayed exactly the same,
Right.
right? And most often, if we do have relationships that stayed exactly the same, we're not really in relation with those people anymore
It's
because
dead. That's
it
why
didn't
it's
grow,
still
it
the
didn't
same.
change, it didn't do anything, right? It's a relationship. Every single one of those touch points I talked about is part of building that relationship. It's how you communicate, which is your messaging. It's what you look like, how you present yourself, your logo, your colors, your aesthetic. It's, how do you interact with me when I encounter your brand, So if you have let's say if you have a physical storefront, what happens when I walk through the door? Am I delighted about every single step of the way between when I walk through the door and when I leave there? If it's not a brick and mortar, it's everything from, let's say I reach out to you on your website and email you because I'm interested to have a discovery meeting with you. Like, what happens between then and making the decision? Every single one of those things is part of that relationship. So, just like if you're dating someone, like there's that initial attraction, like, oh, you're kind of cute, right? And then you start talking to them, and sometimes that's where the relationship falls flat.
That's
Like,
where it ends.
that's not it. But if you get further than that, then it continues to build, right? And you feel like you get to know that person, you feel connected to them, you feel like they understand you. So, like in a perfect business and audience relationship, I say you get to ride off into the sunset together. Like, you get each other, you want to continue growing together, you're excited about being connected to this person. And it's the same thing. So if you think about it in that way, you understand that A, it doesn't happen overnight, and B, that it's much more about having a deeper relationship than it is something transactional.
All about relationship. And I think
Yeah.
that is so key, which is why I've loved this from the start, ever since we had that conversation many, 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 many years ago around branding being like dating, because it is, you build this relationship, you get to know each other, you have those different touch points. Do I like you? I think I like you. Let me hear something else. Oh, I do like you. I really like you.
Right.
And then just taking it through that process, and eventually you close the sale and then you have a client for life, right? So, it's really an amazing thing to think about. But there are a lot of people out there who talk about branding who
Mhm.
don't share that. So one of the questions that came up for me was, what are some of the things that we should be asking when we're thinking about or interviewing to hire a branding expert? Because there are times when if you're new or you're
Mhm.
starting a new venture, you're building a new brand. But as you and I know, that even along when you're an established business, sometimes you shift your brand or you rebrand because you're
Course.
growing and maturing, because nothing stays the same, even in your business.
Exactly.
So what are
Exactly.
things that we need to ask and really uncover? Like, is this the right person for me? And can they really help me build the brand that I'm looking to build?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would ask about process first,
Mm.
similar to how you just asked me, like, what does that look like? And I think that when you work with someone, like if they say, I can build a brand for you in 2 weeks, red
Run.
flag. And not necessarily because it's such a short period of time, although that's part of it. But the other thing is that you want to work with someone who is going to collaborate with you, like
Mhm.
someone who's going to go back behind the curtain and there's lots of smoke and mirrors and they come back and say, ta-da, here's your brand. Like, that process I find to not be as successful for two reasons. One, because you were not intimately involved in the process. And
Mhm.
so that means that there, as a business owner and often an entrepreneur, so much of what that brand you want it to be is in your head. And you've not actually had a chance often to like get all of it out, or nobody to like extract those things from you. So like you might be making decisions intuitively because you have some idea way in the back of your head of what you want this brand to be, but it's not on paper, it's not
Mhm.
transferable. If you hire someone to work with you or work for your brand, like they have no idea what your brand is. And you might try to tell them, but you only told them the surface and there's all this stuff underneath that hasn't been unearthed. So I feel like that takes time. So trying to do it quickly doesn't really help. And also, if you're working with someone who wants to go away and create it for you and bring it back, the problem with that is that you now are in a space where you have a brand that you don't feel connected to.
Mhm.
And if you don't feel connected to it, then the confidence that we were just talking about also ends up lacking. So when I've
Been there,
seen
done
people
that.
get brands created for them in that way, what happens is if you go back to their website 3 or 4 months later, none of that stuff has changed. None of the new brand has been implemented because they never felt like it exactly where they wanted to go. They weren't connected to it and they didn't have confidence in it. And so a lot of the process, I think, is building that relationship with the client so that we can get to a place where it's really going to elevate where they want to be, but without losing the core of what it is that they really want to build, and like pulling all of that information out. So if somebody wants to do it quickly and you're not going to be heavily involved, I would say probably no.
Don't run, don't do it. I've been there. And it
Yeah.
impacts your sales. I remember watching someone who had a brand created for them, no connection. As part of that, there were this is the wild part.
Oh no.
There were offers and things, attached to
Oh,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
it was a whole hot mess.
Yeah.
And to then try to sell this in front on a stage. So I don't know about you, but I still get nervous sometimes being on
Yeah.
stage, right? And to then try to sell something that you have zero connection to,
Mhm.
you have zero intimate knowledge of because you didn't create it.
Yeah.
And it was a nightmare and it was very uncomfortable to witness.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but I've been there, like I'm with you. I was like, I want it quick because that's one of
Yes.
Nadia's strengths and weaknesses. I want it fast and get it done like yesterday. And no, ma'am. Because having an expert like Nakita to even ask you the questions, you don't even know what you don't know, or you didn't know to ask, or really to know to be able to communicate or convey. And you need to give yourself that time. And
Absolutely.
so that, because again, this all ties back to your sales, and you can't show up confidently on a sales conversation when you're not real 100% sure that you know what you're selling. You're not even 100% sure that you even like what you're selling, and you don't know
Right.
nothing about this brand except if you may or may not like the way it looks, right? And so it makes it really, really difficult. So learn from my lesson. Just
And a lot of other people's, trust
yes.
me. Like if you're out there and you've done that, don't feel ashamed. You are not alone. Trust me. But
Trust.
but it does happen. But ideally you want to work with someone that's gonna help you think through it, because I find that sometimes also having that extra time means that it gives the client time to go away and think about it. Like on those strategy calls, I'm like, okay, these are the things I need you to consider for the next call. Like, and you come back to me with your thoughts. Like they need time to marinate on it,
Yes.
especially if it's not a question that you've asked yourself. Now you're being asked that and you understand how important that the answer to that question is, but you might not have an answer yet. So you need time to go figure that out.
Yes. So give yourself time. Slow it down.
Slow it down. So you can't, I know some people do and it does work out, but going back to my relationship analogy, like you can't just meet somebody on the street and be like, you know what, we should have some babies tomorrow.
Right.
Like that's the equivalent. That is the equivalent. I mean, you could, but it does
You
not
could.
work out well.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that either. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we should go make babies. No, no, no.
No.
Not now. I don't even know your last name.
Oh, that's so funny. Actually, that's one of my favorite Carrie Underwood songs. This is a side note, but one of my favorite Carrie Underwood songs is called Last Name, and it's about her running off and getting drunk in Vegas, and she ends up marrying this guy, and she doesn't even know his last name. It is a fantastic song. Not a fantastic story to play out in real life, but it is a fantastic song.
So we're all going to go listen to that, and then we're going to
As you should.
remember that that's what we're not going to do when it comes to our branding, and probably real life too.
Perfect.
Probably would recommend that either. Oh my gosh. So as you're looking at building a brand, Nakita, what are some of the best practices that you would recommend for entrepreneurs, again, whether they're building a new brand, rebranding, or just really wanting to build a stronger brand? What are some of those best practices?
First, like I said, be clear about who your audience is. Even if you're already established, really give yourself a chance to take a hard look at what your audience makeup is. And are those people the people that just keep coming to you, or are those the people that you really want to be serving? And how big of a gap is there? Like, is there a gap between the people you work with now and the people you want to be working with? It's important to know that, even if you don't know how to fill that gap yet. it's important to be able to identify that. So really think about your audience and who you want to be serving. I would say think about the voice of your brand. And when I say voice, I don't just mean like, the writing part of it. Like your voice is truly the personality of your brand. Like, is it fun? Is it flirtatious? Is it educational? Is it sophisticated? Like really think about what the personality of your brand is. I know that all of us have probably encountered a brand that feels a little bit schizophrenic. Like one minute they kind of sound this way, and the other minute they kind of sound that way. And it's like, I don't really know where
What's
these
going on
people
here?
are. Right. And like going back to our relationship talk, right? When you're building that relationship, trust is important. So
Yeah.
think about, if you were dating someone and they showed up completely different personality every time you went out with them,
You
that
wouldn't
wouldn't
know.
last very long because you wouldn't be able to trust them. You feel like you don't know who they are. So it's the same way with your brand. So really think about what you want the personality of your brand to be. And that impacts everything. That impacts your visuals, like what colors you use and what your logo looks like. It impacts your messaging, like what sort of adjectives do you use? How do you write about your brand? Is it fun language? Is it very straightforward? And really think about all those different buckets of what your brand is, and it includes all of those things. Your partnerships are part of that. They say, as people, that saying you're the sum total of the 10 people you spend the most time with. A brand can be very much the same way. If you are a brand or a business that does a lot of partnerships, your
Yes.
partnerships should reflect who your brand is. Like if you look at the list of your partnerships and then you see what your brand is, and it's like, how in the world did they end up partnering together? Like that shouldn't be the case, right? It should be very understandable why these businesses are partnering together. So really think about those. Those are the big buckets. It drills down a lot further, when you're thinking about social media and like all the tactics that you use to kind of reach your audience. But if you have the foundation of those things, then everything else is going to be a lot easier to execute. Yeah, social media is going to be hard if you don't know what your voice is, if you don't have an aesthetic, and you don't know who you're talking to, right? If you don't know
Exactly.
those three things, it's hard to execute almost anything.
For real.
So if you feel like you're fighting an uphill battle with every single aspect of your brand, it's probably because you don't have clarity about some of those foundational things.
Oh, I 1,000% agree. I remember as we've been going through our own pivot, that has
Mm-hmm.
been a big part. That was, we've
Yeah.
gotten there. Hallelujah. But it was a big part because I was like, I don't know who she is. Like I
Yeah.
don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm out here because again, Nadia doing the absolute most. And I'm wanting to do all the things to,
Yeah.
to get out of this very uncomfortable space of figuring some things out and not being as certain as I had been.
Yeah.
And I was trying to write some copy for a webinar I wanted to host.
Mm-hmm.
You'll love this. And I was sitting here and I was just kind of staring at my computer because I'm like, that sounds great. But were we inviting to this party? Right? Like who is this person and what really is their desire and what really is their challenge? Like I think I know, but I don't know. And so
Right.
like, fine, go back to the drawing board, get
Mm-hmm.
clear because again, it impacts so much. And yeah, you want to do a webinar, you want to generate leads, but are you generating the right leads? And then are you
Right.
having the right conversations? And let me tell you, from someone who's had sales conversations and not been clear, I'm
Mm-hmm.
too in my head. I can't be so in my head when I'm having that
Mm-hmm.
conversation because then it was like, well, I guess we could do this or we could do that. Or no. I need to be able to state with certainty that this is what's going to happen to be able
Mm-hmm.
to then instill that confidence in the person I'm talking to. So do yourself a favor,
Oh man,
get
that
clear.
makes so much sense. That
Yes.
makes so much sense. So that, I mean, again, the clarity matters. It really does matter. And if you are, again, struggling with confidence in your brand, or you feel like it's not quite there, or you don't feel like you can like proudly talk to people about it in very clear language, or you feel like you tell people what you do and then they just kind of look at you weird afterwards, like it might need a little tightening up,
Mhm.
and it's not that there's anything wrong with that. We've all been there, but it does make a difference. And I think sometimes people are used to kind of fumbling through it. And so they don't realize how much better it can be if you're like, this is what I do. Like if I can, if it's like that elevator pitch they're always talking about, like it goes past an elevator pitch. If you can say in one sentence what you do and people are like, oh, then you're good. If
Yep.
you say what you do and it takes you 6 sentences to say it, or they have nothing but questions afterwards,
Tell me
then
more. What?
there's a lack of clarity there. And if you live it and breathe it, then it makes sense to you. But if other people don't get it, then it got lost in the sauce somewhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it just makes your life so much easier in your messaging. I know we talk about social media, where you post or how you post, or if you post at all.
Right.
If you're writing newsletters, who you're writing a newsletter to, like it really just helps to be clear on who you are. And again, like you mentioned, Nakita, it helps you to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. You'll be, as a business owner, you're presented with so many different opportunities.
Yep.
And I know Shonda had, well, I think she wrote a book about her year of yes. That may
Yes.
work for Shonda, but that may not work for you. Like there are times that you need to say no, girl. Just say no. No, absolutely not. This
I
is
always
out of line.
I always say that for everything you say yes to means you're saying no to something else, and vice versa. So if you look at it as a trade-off, then it allows you to understand like how tied to things those things are. Because you saying no to something, there's nothing wrong with saying no to something. But if you say no to this, that means that you're leaving space to say yes to the thing you really want or the thing your business really needs, So being able to know what that is and confidently do it, because nobody wants to hem and haw about it and then beat themselves up like, man, maybe I should have done that. But if you made that choice powerfully through the lens of your brand, then you don't have any regrets. You're like, oh no, that's not for me. Period. Full stop.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
love that. So you have a resource.
Yes.
You have a creative leadership masterclass. I want to know more about it so everyone can be involved.
I am launching this in September. One of the things, so, as a branding professional, I've worked in marketing and advertising for a really long time. I work with a lot of creatives. I was a professor of creatives for 13 years. And one of the things that I've seen in those experiences and a lot of my mentees is that, often, especially in the creative space, people tend to do really well at whatever their technical area of genius is. So if they're an art director or a copywriter or they're a videographer or a photographer, there's a lot of lists there, content creators, whatever that is, right? They may be really good at that thing that they do, but normally the reward for doing well at that thing is that you move up. And so when you move up, now you're charged with very different things and very different problems to solve. Now you're managing budgets and now you might be managing other people, whether you're in a business and you're now bringing on a team or whether you're working for someone else and now you have to manage other people. And, often there isn't much training to take those things on. They just kind of throw you in the deep end. They were like, you're really good at that thing. You'll be fine. And they just kind of throw you out there, right?
You got this.
Exactly. And I think that most people that get promoted to that space do have what it takes, but they just haven't been given any tools. And so this is a 3-month masterclass that is set up to really give people those tools. So we'll talk about everything from, having those difficult conversations to how to communicate with your team. And, I'm looking at it through the lens of the creative side of things, but it really does apply to anybody who's looking to move into leadership or already is in leadership that feels like they're not sure, how to do some of these things they're tasked with all the time, how to prioritize their time, how to manage their time differently. Because as we all know, when you get that promotion or you start up leveling your business, now you have twice as many things to do and the same amount of time to do it in. And so, I want to kind of tap into a lot of those things. So the structure is that we'll meet once a week. Every other week is either a group session or an individual session with me. Cool. And I wanted it to be 3 months because it gives you a chance to not only get some of those tools and learn about them in theory, but it allows you to take it away and actually be able to practice it because,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to be like, okay, I get that. And then when the
Right.
time comes to be like, wait a minute, what am I
What did she say I'm supposed to do?
supposed to do?
Hold on.
Exactly. Exactly. So I wanted it to be to, give people time to really let it settle in and be able to deal with some real time scenarios and things that are happening with people.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at a small cohort, probably about 10 people to start with. But I'm launching that in September. So I'm really excited about it. It's a culmination of a lot of different things that I've already done and a lot of training and speaking that I've done. And I see a little bit of a gap for this. And
Mhm.
I just feel like it would really help people get over that hump and have that confidence to lead powerfully.
Yes, 100%. So I love this and I encourage everyone to check it out. We'll make sure the link is in the show notes. Because as you mentioned, as a business owner, as you start to grow and you start building a team, some of the
Mhm.
things that I see are challenges or gaps.
Mhm.
When we go in and we're working with teams and we're helping
Mhm.
them develop these sales skills. I'm like, whoa, we got to talk about culture and we got to address some of the things that have been going on or things that have been allowed to happen
Mhm.
over years in some instances because the business owner, the leader just didn't know how to address them. So
Right.
this is a great resource. And a lot of us are very creative. That's part of our challenge. We got a million ideas. So I
Yeah.
definitely encourage everyone to
Yeah,
really look into this.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. And and whether you work for a big company or your own business, like I think that, from for a small business, often you might have someone at the helm that hasn't created the culture that supports the things they're trying to do, but like the big companies are the same way, believe it or not. Like
Hmm.
often you got, directives coming at you from right and left about all the things, but at the end of the day, you have to consider those and then be able to sort of mix them together with the culture that you want to create on
Yes.
your team,
Yes.
and that's hard to do when you're new to a role sometimes, or you're just not sure how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think those are transferable skills. Those are skills that you can use now and later in a lot of different capacities, I think. So I'm excited to help people in any way I can.
Love it. I can't wait. Yes. So excited. All right, Nikita. So already know I could talk to you for hours and days and years, but so tell people how they can stay connected with you and learn more about all of the great things that you're up to at Branding Chicks.
Yes. Well, you can check out our website at brandingchicks.com. We are also on Twitter, now X, and
Talk about
Instagram.
branding.
Right. On Instagram, we're real branding chicks. Sorry, and on X, we are branding chicks. And if you want to email me directly, you can email me at Nakita Nakita at brandingchicks.com.
Yay. So we'll make sure all of Nikita's info is in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
So
having
good.
me. This was delightful.
Well, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Straight Talk About Sales. We'll see you again soon.